So, what happens when an entire nation just completely loses its way? Today, we're diving into one of history's most radical rescue missions, King Josiah's all-or-nothing shot at pulling his kingdom back from the absolute brink.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. We're going to see a leader push a nation to its limits for the sake of change. But we're also going to have to ask, is even the most perfect, most well-intentioned reform actually enough to erase the damage of the past?
Okay, so to really get a handle on just how monumental Josiah's actions were, you first have to understand how bad things had gotten in the kingdom of Judah. I mean, this wasn't just a minor slump. This was a full-blown identity crisis.
Yeah, this didn't happen overnight. For almost 50 years, under Kings Manasseh and then Amon, the kingdom had been actively, you could say systematically, dismantling its own foundations. We're talking about state-sponsored idolatry. This wasn't just being tolerated, it was official policy to promote foreign gods and rituals, weaving them right into the fabric of national life.
But here's the real problem, the root of it all. The nation was suffering from a kind of collective amnesia. Their foundational, legal, and spiritual text, the Book of the Covenant, wasn't just being ignored, it was physically lost. God! Think about a country losing its constitution. They had literally forgotten who they were supposed to be. Well, everything changes when that lost book is suddenly discovered in the temple. And that discovery, it kicks off the second part of our story, Josiah's incredible effort to reintroduce the entire nation to its own laws.
You know, Josiah's strategy here is just brilliant. This isn't some quiet memo he sends out to the elites. No, he calls a massive national assembly. He gets everyone, priests, prophets, leaders, regular folks, everybody, all in one place to hear the law read out loud. He's making this a public, transparent, and totally binding event for the whole country.
And this is the moment it all clicks. This is the collective buy-in. After hearing what's in the book, the people don't just listen, they stand up. It's this powerful physical act that shows a unified national recommitment. It's a promise, together, to follow the terms of this rediscovered covenant. So let's break down what they actually promised. It really had three parts. First, loyalty, to walk after the Lord. Second, obedience, to keep his commandments. And third, and this is crucial, a promise of action, to actually perform the words written in that book. See, this wasn't just about changing beliefs, it was a commitment to changing behavior, top to bottom.
Okay, so with the nation now publicly on his side, Josiah unleashes what you can only call a great purge. He doesn't just suggest a few changes. He wages a systematic, aggressive campaign to physically remove every single trace of idolatry from the land. And he starts right at the nation's spiritual heart, the temple in Jerusalem. All the ritual objects for foreign gods, like Baal, are dragged out. But he doesn't just throw them away. No, he burns them all in the Kidron Valley, and then, in this incredibly symbolic act, he has the ashes carried to Bethel, which was a rival, unsanctioned worship site, specifically to defile it. He's making a statement.
And this purge, it didn't stop at the temple gates. It was a nationwide sweep, from the northern border of Geba all the way down to Beersheba in the south. He tore down the sites for cult prostitution that were literally right next to the temple. And, most chillingly, he put a permanent end to the horrific practice of child sacrifice at a place called Topheth.
What is just staggering is how deep this reform went, historically speaking. Josiah wasn't just cleaning up the mess his father and grandfather made. He went after altars from other corrupt kings, sure. But then he went even further back, demolishing shrines that the legendary King Solomon himself had built over 300 years earlier. He was systematically trying to erase centuries of compromise.
So after all that physical cleansing, it's time for the spiritual restoration. To mark this new beginning, Josiah calls for a national celebration of the Passover, the festival that commemorates their origin story of liberation and freedom. And this all culminates in the 18th year of Josiah's reign, right around 622 BC. And the scale of this thing was just unprecedented. After nearly 2 decades on the throne, his reform hits its spiritual peak with this event. The text makes a huge point of saying that a Passover like this hadn't happened in hundreds of years, not since the time of the judges. This was a national reset on a truly historic scale. So, righteous king? Check. Repentant people? Check. Restored covenant? Check. The story should end right there with a happily ever after, right?
Well, it doesn't. And this is where this whole story takes a really dark and unexpected turn.
I mean, the text goes out of its way to praise Josiah. It says flat out, there was no king like him, before or after. Someone who turned to God so completely, with all his heart, all his soul, all his might. By every single metric, he was the perfect king who did everything right.
So the logical conclusion here is that this perfect reform must have saved the nation, right? His actions surely must have guaranteed a bright future for Judah.
Notwithstanding. That's the killer word right there. It means despite everything Josiah did, all the reforms, the purges, the Passover, the judgment that was set in motion by the deep, deep corruption of his grandfather, Manasseh, it was irreversible. The damage, it seems, was just too deep. The consequences were already locked in.
And the fall was shockingly fast. Just about a decade after that incredible Passover, Josiah himself is killed in battle. His death is the end of the line for Judah's righteous kings. Soon after, the whole region's power shifts to Babylon, and by 586 BC, Jerusalem is conquered and the temple is destroyed. The reform, as perfect as it was, couldn't stop the collapse.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Josiah's story is this gripping, almost tragic lesson in the limits of change. It leaves us with a really chilling question. Can any reform, no matter how righteous or how total, ever truly outrun the consequences of the past?